All right, so in this video, I'm just realizing I'm kind of shoved up in the corner here. In this video, I'm going to try to lay out what I see as the wisdom, kind of maybe the structure underlying why letting go and praying are wise, why letting go and prayer can work, and how it can serve us. And I think a lot of us take this as a matter of faith, or we take it as a matter of experience because it's worked for us, and so we do it. And so I wouldn't in any way suggest that this is something that we need to know to justify doing it. But if you're struggling with it, you don't believe it works, or if you've been having mixed experiences with it, this may provide some some clarity, some insight, maybe some motivation or inspiration to give it a shot again. So to open, I'm going to lay out again my framework. Oh, and I'll say this too. I made a video the other day called The Flow of Recognition and the Flow of Wisdom. And this is going to use a similar framework to that. And I definitely think you'll get more out of this video if you've seen that other one. I'm going to try to make it so that it's standalone and not necessary, but just want to make that plug that if you like this, or if you're interested in getting the most possible out of this, you might watch that video first. Okay, so the framework, we have oneness, we have God, we have spirit, we have physical being, right? Everything is oneness. Again, I draw this line around it, but this is oneness. You watching this is oneness. Oneness is the pure, unrealized potential of what is. It's not physical. It has no space. And yet, mysteriously from it springs all that is physical. I think in Buddhism, it's kind of akin to the notion of emptiness. And God is all that is, right? All that is manifested. God is both the creator, the created, and the creating, the experiencer and the experience and the experienced. You're God, I'm God. This screen you're watching this on is God. Everything you touch and see today is God in my conception of things. A spirit, right, which I use for capital I, is basically an individuated aspect of God. So God, in order to more fully and more richly experience God's self, basically breaks off into, I don't know how many, millions, trillions of individual, unique perspectives from which God can then look out on the entirety of God's self. And maybe a metaphor for this is, the number of galaxies or stars in a universe is perhaps the number of spirits operating there. Again, that's just kind of my maybe wishful thinking way of things, but essentially it's a way for God, kind of a porthole or a portal within God's self through which God can then get a perspective and experience God's self. And then just as God individuates into spirit, the spirit then emulates God and does a similar move, individuating into a number of physical beings, like the human being I am, the human being you are. And just as God individuates into spirits in order to get a wider range and diversity of perspectives on oneself, the spirit then does that to get a wider range of perspective both on the spirit self and on the God self, which is again always in manifestation of learning more and more about what is, which is oneness. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is, just as I did in the flow of recognition and the flow of wisdom, I'm going to break this down into a ring. So I'm going to take those same letters and I'm going to array them on a circle. G, I, and I'm going to add E. E stands for energy or environment, right? It's the physical world in which we operate. Your hair is E, this pen is E, the screen you're watching this on is E. Anything physical and actual, experienceable is the environment. And in my conception of things, I include the body in that and think of the body as this kind of uniquely situated aspect of the environment which is feelable from within, right? So for example, this pen is my environment. Why? Because I can obtain information about it through my senses, but it is not body for me because I cannot feel the pen from within, as opposed to the hand that's holding this pen. I feel from within the experience of this hand. I don't just feel what this hand touches through its skin, I also have this sensation or the experience through my nervous system of feeling like I am within it and then feeling like I actually operate this hand, right? And so our body is that aspect of the environment that through the nervous system, we have the ability to feel from within. So that's what I mean by E, the body and its environment. And so what our typical experience is, we, right, as physical being, right, human being, we have this sensory interaction with our environment. That's what we call our life. If we live in kind of a small conception of ourselves, we may from birth to death essentially believe that all we're doing is having a sensory kind of feedback experience with the environment where we're learning things, we're then behaving in certain ways, the environment may be adapting to that or we adapt to the environment, but essentially that this is our relationship and this may actually be our sense of reality. Now, what I believe is that even if you're having this small sense, you are still essentially expressing the larger truth of who and what you are, right? Which stems from oneness through God, through spirit to the self. And so you're always a bigger than your conception of what you are. But if what you want to begin to do is to live in the flow and the truth of this larger conception of what you are, letting go and prayer are two tools that allow us to do that. And so what I'm going to do using this diagram is to try and demonstrate kind of in a structural or conceptual way how I think letting go and prayer works, why I think it works, and then how you could potentially utilize it in day-to-day life to get out of this loop and to get into a broader, more expansive, and I believe ultimately wiser and healthier way of being. So the upshot of what I'm saying, kind of my thesis, is going to be that when we get information from our environment, right, our environment provides us information in the form of, say, we have a relationship and we notice it's going particularly well or particularly poorly. We're doing things that either bring our loved one pleasure or tend to cause our loved one aggravation. That's one example. We may notice, for example, we have certain habits with our bodies, you know, the ways we're eating, the ways we're exercising, the ways we're treating ourselves, habits of mind, all these sorts of things, where if we're stuck in this loop, essentially what we're doing is we are basically relying on our environment to give us information on how to act toward our environment. So we may have, you know, magazines we subscribe to, people whose blogs we read, or we get their newsletters. I know I every week get emails from certain people, you know, a couple different teachers who I like, who give me information that stretch my mind and help me look at things in a different way. And that's very valuable. What I think we lose, though, is we lose the sight that in addition to getting information from our environment, in other words, I think we should be doing that because other people are valuable teachers, we also don't realize that we actually have these other teachers inside of ourselves, within ourselves, who can provide wisdom similar to the information that our earthly teachers give us. The value of the earthly teachers, they come at things from a different perspective, right? They're a different eye, all in the same environment. They experience their own loops in different ways, right? And if they're playing this game that I'm talking about, they're actually then channeling from their deeper and higher sense of self into their being and able to share that perspective with us. And so we definitely should be relying on earthly teachers for information. But to strengthen our own earthly teaching for ourselves and others, we want to tap into our higher order intelligence, our higher goodness, right, our higher virtue of ourself. And so what we want to do is we want to take what's on our mind, right? Take what we're noticing, the patterns we're seeing, right? And I used those examples before of like relationship patterns or patterns for our own physical or mental well-being. I'm like, God, I keep getting stuck on this same thing. You know, I keep having this thought come up again and again. I don't know what it means. I don't know what to make of it. We may loop and loop and loop in our own minds about it, but because in our own minds we're stuck with what's essentially already in our brain, we tend to just circle the same pond, right? Kind of hit the same corners again and again without really being able to get into any kind of expansive or new sense of things. We can rely on our external teachers in the world to give us stuff, right? And that's helpful because that uncoils that loop, right? And we get into broader things. but especially if our earthly teachers are doing the same thing we are, then essentially what we're doing is kind of taking jewels out of their mind and bringing them into our own, but they may still be kind of narrow. They may still be confined. They may be a little mundane or materialistic. They may not have those qualities that this higher order intelligence can bring, which is really more of a transcendent source of wisdom as opposed to just a smart way of being based on how we already are. Okay. So what I'm talking about here is when we have that cue from the environment that just keeps coming, right? It keeps coming at us maybe in different ways. Man, I'm hitting a dead end or a wall in my relationships or in my health or in my mental well-being, in my career, whatever it is. And it just kind of keeps coming at us. This is when we can let go, right? Surrender and pray. And what happens, what I believe happens when we do that, is instead of these things coming in, let me use, for example, relationships as an example. Say a romantic relationship. And we notice, God, every time I keep doing X, right, that causes my loved one, right, to feel negatively, right? And I can't see this connection. I can't figure out why when I'm doing this, it causes them that, right? And this is not an obvious example like, oh, I'm verbally abusing them, right? Or, oh, I'm, not flushing the toilet or, whatever. Like, this is sometimes there's just things that seem to be aggravating the other person. We may not even really know what X is, but we know that there's something we're doing that's creating disharmony in our relationship. And so we're thinking, okay, what can I do? What can I adjust or change within myself to try to bring more harmony into my relationship with my loved one? And again, if we just turn into our own brains and we think, then all we're going to do is loop in what we already know, and we're not likely to find a surprising or inspiring or really effective solution. So what we want to do is let go of this loop. Let go of the loop of thinking. Let go of the loop of our habitual analysis. And basically send it upstream into spirit. Send it upstream into God. Send it upstream into oneness. And what we're doing here, right, that's letting go. So in other words, instead of looping around X, right, we say, hey, here's X. Here's the pattern I see. And I'm just going to send it up. I'm going to say, you know what, something's going wrong. My loved one lately has been responding negatively to me, seems either scared of me or bothered by me, or is taking issue with me. There's something going on, and I want to change it. I want to address it. And I've done my thinking. I've kind of looped around it, and I'm getting nowhere. So I'm gonna just announce, privately within myself, or maybe even write a note or a journal, or just close my eyes and I'm gonna pray, and I'm gonna say, look, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I think it is. Here's my exploration. And I send it up. I release it. I let it go. I release my mind from the obligation of trying to figure it out, right? Trying to squeeze the drop of truth out of this lemon. I've tried it. That's not working. I'm going to send it up to the higher powers. And I'm going to trust, right? I'm going to have faith that if it is wise, if it is in my best interest for them to return to me wisdom, to return to me some insight, right, that will happen, right? I'm going to take that leap of faith. And what's tricky about this is we surrender it up, but then what often happens is we kind of do the surrender, right? Like we'll close our eyes and we'll say, okay, here's the pattern, and I surrender it to you. And then we kind of like peek out of the corner of our eye. We're like, did it work? Did I get an idea? And if it didn't, we then go, ugh, darn. And we go back here. We go back into the noodle, right, back into the labyrinth, and we try to solve the problem again there. And I think a reason that kind of backfires is that then takes the energy and the intention of our prayer, of our letting go, right? And what do? We're essentially taking it back to ourselves. And these higher powers, my sense of things, this is certainly not my original idea, I think I've heard this from a lot of other places, is that they essentially respect our autonomy and respect our free will. In other words, they're allowing us in our time, in our way, to kind of learn and to grow and to develop and mature. And they don't act like, a domineering figure, They're not a control freak. They don't come in and go, oh God, you're doing this wrong, let me fix it for you. They essentially allow us, through the trial and error process, to try to figure it out for ourselves. And as I talked about in my other video, they will send wisdom down our stream, right? We'll feel wisdom kind of spring up within us, or through our environment, right? Through others, human teachers, things like that, through coincidences or circumstances in our life. They'll show us patterns that, if we recognize them, can offer solutions to some of these issues that come up in our lives. But the mistake we make is that when we take back that release, when we take that intention of surrendering to the higher power back into our own minds and recoil around it, we're essentially telling the higher power through implication, hey, I don't want you to work on this anymore. I don't trust you to send this back to me. I really only trust myself and my own mind. Maybe I don't even believe you exist. So I'm going to go back and work on it in my noodle, thank you very much, and I'll try to come up with the solution. And, a little side note, I think one of the reasons we do this, right, is vanity, which is the dance of pride and shame, right? And we think, oh, there's not enough time, I'm not good enough, right? There's a problem here. So we get negative and so rush ourselves to try to fix this instead of doing it in an open, contemplative way. Or pride, we want to be able to tell ourselves, hey, I saw the issue and I solved it myself, right? I did this, me. I get to stamp I get to take credit for the authorship of this, right? This is a credit and a blame game. And so anyway, I think that's part of what drives us back into this is we go, we surrender it up. We see, oh man, it's not coming as quickly as I want. And then vanity kind of whispers in our ear, wouldn't it be better if you kind of figured it out on your own anyway so that we can take the credit when it happens? Not realizing that we're then looping ourselves back into a blame game too, because when it's not working, that same vanity will turn around, right? It's two-faced, and it'll say, God, you fool, you should have just surrendered it up to the higher power, disregarding that it was vanity that tempted us back into our private practice by itself. That's a whole nother video or series of videos. But anyway, going back to the core idea, right? We have an issue. We've worked on it ourselves. We've acknowledged to ourselves honestly, hey, I've worked on it. I've tried my games, my tricks, my techniques, and it hasn't worked. Surrender it, right? And then the hard part is trusting in that surrender, having faith in that surrender, and recognizing when we're trying to work on it back in ourselves and resurrender, right? Don't, when you catch yourself here, don't get into this pride and shame game and beat yourself up for doing it or come up with some elaborate justification for why you did it. Just recognize, oh, here I am, right? I'm noodling this issue again. I already acknowledge that I've tried noodling it and it didn't work. And really what I'm looking for here is something higher, something wiser and smarter than I am to kind of come in and to give me guidance that I can't really find for myself. And so every time I find myself looping back in here, which I'm going to do because it's a habit, I just resurrender. I recommit to the intention of letting go and of praying for guidance, trusting that it's going to come, right? And I think what we'll find, one of kind of the ways this works, is that act of surrendering, that act of letting go, it kind of breaks our entrancement with this vanity game, and with this, right? This kind of coiling around what we think we already know. And in most cases, the problem we're having, right, if it's in a romantic relationship, if it's in our career, if it's in, patterns of our physical or mental health, it, in my experience, tends to stem from something around this anyway. We have some pride or shame game, some credit or blame economy that we're working in, right, or some kind of stiff way of thinking that has us trapped in some loop. And this problem we're having in our career or relationship is actually a cue in the environment, right, from oneness telling us, hey, there's a better way to go about this. You're kind of hitting your head against the wall, you're kind of stuck in an old way of doing things, and I, oneness, right, through environment, am trying to steer you toward a better way of being, a more expansive or broader way of being. And so it uses our relationships and our careers and these other things that are important to us, and it introduces kind of dilemmas in them. And these dilemmas are either from this perspective, problems, right, crises, tragedies, oh boy, that we need to really start fretting and worrying about, or from an expansive view, it's actually an opportunity to let go of our stiff in old ways of thinking, get back into a surrender posture, right? Into a humble posture, right? And just that very act of surrendering, right? Even if we don't see the answer coming back anytime soon, in my experience and from what I gather from others, that itself may often be the solution we were looking for. Just breaking our entrancement, right? Our hypnotic addiction to our own patterns of thinking, and breaking this drama game we have of thinking that nothing's good enough for us and we're not good enough for anything too. Like, that's really, if you look at the core premises of pride and shame in the vanity game, it's this sense that, right, nothing's good enough, but that we're too good for everything somehow. Notice how that doesn't leave any room for reality. It just creates this constant mind game we bounce around in. And so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when we encounter these difficulties in our lives, when we're feeling stuck, when we're feeling like there's dilemmas, see that as an opportunity to try, like truly try on your own to resolve it. And once you have given it a good faith effort, see that as an opportunity to surrender and let it go. And just know that by surrendering and letting go, and then when you come back into your mind again, surrender and let go again, just by doing this, right, that habit will gradually unfurl the mind, uncoil the mind, and allow new ideas, new attitudes, new ways of looking at things to come in. And this is what can allow us to break some of those dams that come up in our relationships, in our careers, in our own physical and mental well-being, and allow us to tap into new ways of doing things that can bring us into realms of possibility. I want to say success, but really just more growth and development than what we thought possible when we were confining ourselves to our usual conditioned way of doing things.